Hi, I'm Paul. So for this video, I'm going to try and talk about uh, the ego or attachment to thought, where it comes from, how it started. Probably also going to describe why it is that we seek, or how we find it hard to stop seeking. So ego, attachment to thought, where did it come from? So let's say that my brain from birth has been shaped, let's say, from generations and conditioned. And I think the main conditioning of the brain from a young age would be to be conditioned into thought. So, being conditioned into thought, and then as a child tries to seek security, becomes attached to thought, which is the ego. And so, a young child with parents, see, like I say, this brain has been shaped and conditioned through generations. My parents also had this same conditioning of attachment to thought. So this kind of is saying that this attachment to thought is so let's say I'm attached to my thought, which is the ego, which is self-centered. I've said this before. I can't know you by knowing you, which is to say that if I say I know you, then I'm using my memories of you. I see you, then I go into my memories, and then I try to describe you from the memories that I have. But what I'm seeing is my memories. What I'm seeing is my description of you. This is thought. I'm not seeing you. I'm only seeing myself. So, our parents, being conditioned themselves, also have this attachment to thought, attachment to ideas. So, the parent who has the attachment to thought can't see the child who the child is. And this attachment to thought creates a conflict with the child. And for the child to try to settle the conflict then creates an attachment to thought itself. You see, if I was abusive to you, disagreeable, or just plain can't see you and argues against you, what happens in your mind? You start going into thought, trying to reason, trying to explain, trying to find some sense of reality out of it. So therefore, you become attached to thought. So the parent who's attached to thought doesn't see the child, which then creates the child to start attaching to thought as well. So, firstly, we have thoughts, find security in these thoughts, become attached to this thought, and therefore see the world itself afterwards through thought, our own interpretation. This is to say, not to see the world itself, but to see the world as a reflection, a shadow, which is our thoughts. So, now that we can see that the ego is the attachment to thought, and we want to try to get out of this attachment to thought, I guess I think the only way out of this really is to see the attachment to thought fully. Let's say you have a thought, and you take a look at this thought. Uh, I don't know, I like this, whatever thought you want. And you look at this thought. Does this thought have an entity of its own that then can create another thought? If you look at this, you'll see that thought itself doesn't create thoughts. So we can kind of see that this would just be one thought, and then another thought. Then there's this attachment onto the thoughts. We could say the attachment is the observer. The observer is the observed. So the observer of the thoughts is creating thoughts, the contents of the consciousness. So when we look at our thoughts and see that it's just one thought after another thought, if we have a look at one of the thoughts, let's say, I like this, whatever thought you have, we take a look at this. Can this thought, which doesn't have an entity itself, it's just a thought, can this thought be aware of its own self? Or if you look into this, just observe what happens. Can that thought itself be aware of its own self? Perhaps when you try to see if this thought could be aware of itself, perhaps you might notice that you flick from awareness to the thought. Perhaps you notice you can't stay at the thought to see if the thought can be aware of itself, but then you flick to awareness to be aware of the thought. So we can say that awareness isn't the thought. So, if we're saying that the observer is the attachment to thought, the observer is the thought creator. The observer creates the thought and becomes attached to it. This is to say, if I know you by description, the observer is creating the description of you and becoming attached to the description of you. So the idea is to try to get past this attachment to thought. So, what does it look like to see things without thought? If I see a tree and there's no thought, all I see is the tree. So this would just be sight without memory, descriptions, ideas. I just say it's sight. We can also do this in our inner world through sight. So we could observe ourselves, become aware of ourselves without thought. You see, I see a tree as sight. Insight would be to see inside, but just to see inside. So it's just sight. I remember when I was in therapy, the way I went through some of my difficulties, traumas, whatever you want to call it, is I would observe inside, and I would see. Let's say I see a child. I would see that child. I would see the child is sad. I would see the child is confused. I would see the child. I wouldn't just try to describe the situation, the time, the event. I would genuinely see it, and I would go through it in motion, I guess. So this would be what it's like to see without using thought, memory. So this attachment to thought is always trying to seek out the next thought to attach onto, to give security. So let's say we start to have insights. We start to say something's not right here, something's wrong with the world, I don't like this, it doesn't feel right. In one way I'm saying I'm starting to wake up, I'm starting to realize that the ideas that I have was wrong, so now I need to find what's right. So I seek out somebody who perhaps knows or pretends to know me or anybody else. And then I seek out what they have to say. And I say, yes, this story which I'm hearing sounds more like it. So this is the thought maker making a thought that this is the right way to go. The old story is incorrect. I now need to seek a new story. I now need to seek a new image in my head. The thought maker needs to make thoughts of a new story. You see, both the old story and the new story come from the same place, from the thought creator. So now we find ourselves seeking. Let's say I seek pleasure. I want pleasure. I want somebody to say something nice to me. So somebody says something nice, and I create an image in my head of what they've said, and this image is good. And I become attached to that image which I created in my head, which came from what they said. So this is the thought creator trying to create a good image. But if I attach to this good image, good thought, then that must mean that I'm open to bad thoughts. So somebody comes up and says, you're an idiot. The whole idea of having security from attaching to something good is also the downfall. So trying to seek for somebody else's knowledge, somebody else's wisdom, is just the thought maker trying to make a new idea, a new something to attach onto, some other way of gaining security from something different than what appears to have failed. So, how do we find a way stopping seeking. So we've come to a decision maybe that as long as the thought maker is trying to create new images, then we're still trapped in the seeking. So to get past the seeking, we need to stop the thought maker making thoughts, making images, making scenarios, making ideas, giving us security, finding something to hold on to. I think the only way really that we can do this is from insight, learning how to just observe and see. I know a lot of people say try to see the outside world just by sight, which is where some teachers say that if you look at a tree, the tree needs to disappear, there's no tree. But we can also do this on the inside as well, just by insight, to see, to watch what happens without any conflict. So let's say you look in the past and you did something embarrassing or whatever. Can you see that without creating conflict and accept it? Without creating more thoughts of maybe I am an idiot, maybe I am stupid, just see it. See it only. I think I'm stuck for words now, so I'm gonna leave it there. Thanks so much for listening.